Welcome to Team G503. I am your host, Scott Schiller, and in this video I'll be removing the L134 GPW engine out of the 1943 Willys MB chassis. Before I get started, I'd like to stress that when you're working with heavy equipment like this and a heavy engine and a hoist, you want to be really careful in the shop. Make sure you've got plenty of room and your workspace is clear and clean, and make sure your floor is nice and clean, because you'd be surprised that lift does not like to roll over small little grainy things on your garage floor. Let's begin. I'm going to start by simply draining the oil out of the oil pan of the L134. Just have to remove the plug here. And out comes the oil. I'm going to be removing the L134 from the chassis of the 1943 Willys Jeep, and this is a GPW engine. I'm going to go ahead and loosen up and remove the 4 corner head bolts on the head, and I'm going to fasten my load leveler to it so I can use that with my lift and hoist. I've got the load leveler attached and secure, and the bolts all tightened back down. The engine is fastened with a bracket to 2 engine mounts, one on the driver's side and one on the passenger side. So we'll have to remove those nuts. I'm going to be removing the engine from the bell housing, so I'll be removing the 8 bolts that attach to the back side of the engine. Going to start removing the bolts from the bell housing. On either side of the bell housing, the passengers and the drivers, you have what my friend used to call the special bolts for the L134, and they're actually called dowel pin bolts, but you notice they're longer and they go right through here, this meaty part of the lower part of the casting on the block. I'm going to remove those. Just going to gently tap here. I've got this nut past the threads, so I don't want to damage the threads, but you should be able to just give that a little tap, come out loose. Grab a hold of it here and just work it out with a little pair of needle nose pliers. Out it comes. Dowel pin bolt. To reduce the height that I have to lift the engine, I've removed the nuts from these 2 studs that are on the bottom side of the engine mount. And that way I've only got to come up just a little bit. I don't want to risk damaging the input shaft. And I should be able to slide this engine right off the input shaft and lift it up and out of the chassis. The last little bit that's tethering this engine to the frame is this ground strap that we've got going from the engine mounting bracket to the frame. So we'll have to remove that. It's just a simple nut and bolt. You've got that ground strap. I'm going to put the bolt right back into the engine mounting bracket. And now we're ready to apply a little pressure with our engine hoist. I've removed the fan from the water pump only because I don't want to get into a situation where I'm going to bend that or hit that somehow as I pull this engine out of the chassis. The way I've got this set up is I've got the hoist on the top of the leveler, and I'm going to put a little pressure to lift it above the studs on the engine mounts, and then I should be able to slide the engine off of the input shaft on the transfer case. I'm steadily applying pressure to the hydraulic cylinder on the lift, and I'm simply lifting the engine very, very slightly off of the chassis and now sliding it forward. That worked out fantastically. Now I can use the engine hoist, again, slowly and steadily, being as safe as I can and cautious. Don't want to cause that engine to swing in the air. And I'm just going to simply lift it up and over the front cross member of the chassis. I'm really enjoying the load leveler. As you see, I can make the engine actually flat because I'm about to lower it onto a pallet that I have prepared on the floor. I'm a little hung up on my moving blanket, so I'll get that out of the way. A couple more times on the hydraulic pump, and we'll have the engine high enough to get over the top of the cross member. Gently pulling it away from the chassis, slow, steady movement, steady pressure. I've placed a pallet on the legs of the engine hoist, and I'm going to lower it temporarily onto the pallet while I get my bracket for my engine stand. I turn the relief screw on the hydraulic arm and slowly guide the engine to the pallet on the floor. I'll be removing the pressure plate by removing the 6 bolts and then just simply pulling it away from the flywheel. The pressure plate simply comes off after you've got the last bolt out. You just simply pull it away from the flywheel, and inside you'll find the clutch disc. The next step is to remove the 6 bolts that hold the flywheel onto the crankshaft. You'll have to put a wrench behind the backer plate to get access to the bolt to be able to remove the nut from the front, but they'll come off pretty easily. In some cases, you may need to use a puller to pull the flywheel off the crankshaft. I've left one little nut on here just to be safe so it doesn't fly off, and I'm just wiggling this back and forth, and this one should come off pretty easily. And the flywheel is removed, and I'll put that aside for safekeeping. Last but not least, you have your engine backer plate that is attached to the bell housing. That just simply comes off. I've attached the bracket from my engine hoist to the back side of the block with some bolts and some spacers so I can turn the crankshaft. Now I'll simply put some pressure on the engine hoist, lift it up. Got the bracket attached, and my goal here is to get that bracket lined up with the actual stand so I can remove that and push that away from the chassis. I'm lifting slow and steady, not to make any sudden movements, and then I can use this leveler that I got, and I can be able to turn this at a little angle so it will slide right inside the stand. I can slide the bracket easily inside the stand. Once I've got the engine at the correct height and I'm at the correct angle for the actual bracket to slide into the stand, I'll simply slide the bracket into the stand, and then I'll secure the bracket with the cotter pin. Now it's just as simple as taking the pressure off the lift in the engine and lowering it to the floor completely and solidly, and then I can wheel that engine anywhere I want to in the shop. The engine is now secure and safe on the stand, and we're ready for disassembly. Thank you for watching. So now you see we've got the engine on this engine stand. In our next video, I'll be disassembling this. If you like what we're doing and you'd like to follow along or see the archive video since the time this 43 Willys MB arrived to me in Aiken, South Carolina, you can subscribe to us at Team G503 on YouTube. Thank you for your support, and thank you to Ron Fitzpatrick and Ron Fitzpatrick Jeep Parts. Until next time, keep it safe and happy Jeeping.